Yo, what's up guys, Grim here, and in today's video I want to show what I believe to be the most versatile boss killer of the Ritual League. It's able to do all content on 5-man HP, with the exception of the Feared Invitation, in which it can do 2-man HP, pretty much any roles, and it is the Mind Over Matter Mana Miner. Now this build was created, to my knowledge, by someone called Akane, so full props to her. She's got a YouTube channel which I'll link in the description. And I also took inspiration from SkCloudy's version, SkCloudy's version of this build as well, to create what you're seeing in the background here, which is obviously the Mana Miner, which takes advantages of a ton of different mechanics, which I'll explain to you guys in this video. And if you're interested in kind of giving this build a go, it is an absolute blast. It's definitely very, very versatile. And the reason I say that is it's very, very good at bossing. One of the best, in fact. It's very, very good at map clear. It's got incredible movement speed, which I'll show you guys here. When you get actual mana up. It's got incredible movement speed due to flask effect and berserk. You can see I move incredibly fast. And it's got very, very high defensive. It's got about 100,000 effective HP. With all of its buffs up, and that's not an over-exaggeration. It's got close to dodge cap using phase acro, as well as the Akane boots. So it's incredibly defensive, incredibly fast, has some of the highest damage in the game, and it's just definitely really a blast to play. Alright, so let's get into how the build works. So first of all, why would you play this character and what is it for? Well, as I mentioned, it's a pretty good all-rounder. It's kind of a catch-all for everything. You swap between Ball Lightning and Arc for mapping and kind of clearing, and Ball Lightning for massive boss damage. And what else is it good for? Well, other than being versatile, it is actually probably, in my opinion, one of, if not the best, for Maven Invitation Rota carries. So this is a new kind of form of gameplay where essentially you host a Maven Invitation Rota game kind of group, and for example, let's say you decide to do the Feared Invitation, which is the one I've been doing. So the Feared Invitation here, essentially you'd get a group of 5 other people to come in with you, and you'd run all of the prerequisites for the Feared, so Cortex, Chayula, Alluring Abyss, and you'd run it on 6-man HP as the carry. And then at the end, you do every single one of the people's invitations, and then all trade you an Exalted Orb or whatever you decide the fee is. Now, the essential requirement here is that your boss killer can do, Shaper, Chayula, Urudziri, with Maven witnessing it with 6-man HP, which this boss killer is actually fully able to do. If you want to go check that out, you can check out my latest VOD on Twitch. But yeah, suffice to say, this thing is an absolute beast. And if you're able to do Maven Invitation Rotas, you're going to be able to make an incredible amount of currency per hour, because this can generally do about 2 to 3 rotations per hour if you're quick and going through the maps. And that's going to net you, anywhere between, 10 to 15 exalts per hour, depending on what kind of drops you get. And that's going to be really, really good for you because, the cost of the maps actually pay for themselves for the most part. And, you get the carry money as well. So it's very, very good currency per hour. You can probably, rack up a mirror a day if you play a lot, which is pretty awesome. So very, very good character. Let's explain how it works though. So you've decided you want to make this character maybe. So what are you getting yourself into? Well, there's a lot of different dimensions here. Akane herself, the person who made the build, probably has plenty of videos on this, but I figured I'll give it a go at explaining it as well. So the general premise of the build is that you abuse Indigon. So Indigon is an item that gives you spell power for every amount of mana that you spend. And that's the main scaling for this build. So you can see here that I have 8,400 mana. And for every 250 mana I spend, 200 mana I spend, I get 25% increased spell damage. And the way you spend mana in this build is using a skill called Arcane Cloak. So Arcane Cloak, you can see here, it consumes 73% of my current mana, and it gives me a bunch of buffs. One of them being adding a ton of flat lightning damage to my skills, as well as giving me a massive overshield. That's how you achieve that 100,000 effective health in combination with dodge. So very, very powerful. Now, I also have a helm enchantment in here, which makes me spend an additional 15% of that. So I actually end up spending 88% of my 8,300 mana. Now, 8,400 mana, sorry. Now, this essentially allows me to trigger Indigon, giving me tons of flat lightning and tons of spell damage. So if you actually look at my skill here, which is Arc, it's just what I'm using right now for clear, you can see after I use Arcane Cloak, boom, it goes up to well over 180k for a few seconds. So that's very, very powerful. Very, very impressive there. You can also synergize this with other abilities like Sigil of Power, which is very, very good as well. And when you put Sigil of Power down, depending on how much mana you've spent, it upgrades the stages of it, and you can get more flat lightning damage as well. So let's put down Sigil of Power. We'll charge back up, and we'll throw on Arcane Cloak, and you can see here now we go up to even more damage generally. It's actually a little bit lower because of flask effect and stuff like that. But yeah, it's kind of, let's see if we can get it a bit higher. It depends on how much money you have at the time. Anyway, so that's that mechanic. So you got Sigil of Power and you got Arcane Cloak, both of those working with Indigon. That's kind of the mana side of things. And then you also make use of an ability called Berserk. So Berserk is what's giving me all my movement speed to run around like this, and it also gives you a ton of throwing speed to make you throw at unreasonable speeds. Very, very strong. Now Berserk actually makes use of a rage mechanic, which was originally added to the Berserker, but recently, in the last few leagues, they've added a new Timeless Jewel keystone called Chainbreaker. So Chainbreaker essentially lets you regenerate rage, and also gives you regeneration of rage based on your mana regen. It sets your mana regen to essentially generate rage instead, which is very, very powerful because we do get a lot of mana regeneration on this build. So we got stuff like Ethereal's Foible, we've got mana recovery everywhere, all sorts of things, which is very, very good indeed. So you're going to have a lot of rage regeneration. Now, the cool thing about rage and Berserk is that there's actually an alternate quality Berserk, which gives you spell damage instead of attack damage. You can see here, buff grants 44% more spell damage, which is essentially like a 7th link, which also gives you probably like about a link worth of throwing speed and movement speed as well. So it's almost like you're on an 8 link just from using Berserk. And you're able to juice this up with stuff like Enhance, and all sorts of stuff. It's incredibly powerful. And the end result is like when you when you throw on Sigil Power, Arcane Cloak, and Berserk, you start getting really, really high numbers on your mines, which is incredibly strong. And you definitely move very quickly, and you're able to do maps very fast as well, which is very, very fun to kind of play around with. Now, let's get into the mana side of things. So we replaced all our mana regeneration with rage generation. So how do we get all of our mana? Well, you get all of your mana using a mana flask. And the way that you're actually able to sustain this is using the Pathfinder Ascendant Ascendancy, which essentially gives you a ton of flask charges, chance to not consume flasks, all sorts of good stuff. You also combine this with reduced flask charges used on your belt and other places on the tree to essentially make it so that you never ever can run out of flask charges and you sustain them instantly. You can essentially piano your flask constantly in boss fights and they will never run out ever. And that essentially allows you to not require any mana regeneration at all, and you rely purely on your flask for regenerating your mana, and that's going to be really, really strong. You also have to take a bunch of mana recovery nodes and all that kind of stuff, and flask recovery nodes on the tree, but that kind of just contributes to your overall character. So, what have we learned so far? So, mana on this build equals damage due to Arcane Cloak, Sigil of Power, and Indigon. So, the more mana you have, the more damage you deal. It's just that simple. In addition to that, we also abuse Berserk with Rage, which is really, really strong. And the way we actually get so much effective life is using a Akane, which gives us dodge per amount of mana that we have, which is always going to be very high due to our mana flask. And we also take phase acro and acro on the tree. But we have an additional defensive layer at our disposal as well. And that is Mind over Matter. So the chess piece we're using right here is indeed the Cloak of Defiance. So this gives you a keystone called Mind over Matter, which means 30% of damage is taken from mana before life. So let's say I get hit for 100. 30 of that damage will be taken away from my mana instead of my life pool. Essentially, giving me 30% more life, which is really, really powerful. Now, what's really, really cool on this build is that you also can pick up a ton of other sources of this stat. So you can get 10% on your Watcher's Eye, which is strong. You get an additional 10% on Cloak of Defiance, so now you're up to 50%. And then you get an additional 8% from Hierophant. So you essentially get 58% more life, which is really powerful. And that kind of juices our life up a little bit. Combining that with Cloak, Arcane Cloak, you essentially have incredible defensive kind of power. And if you actually look at Cloak when we have everything up, you can see here I get a 6,899 overshield, which is really strong. And that isn't just a pure overshield, like it'll take it from life and hybrid, and it all just meshes together and gels together with dodge and all sorts of stuff for massive effective health. Now, one of the things that you get on this build as well is incredible flask effectiveness, meaning it contributes to your adrenaline Quicksilver flask, which is really nice. But the main thing that it contributes to is the Wise Oak. So you'll see here on the Wise Oak, you get a ton of damage from the penetration, but it also, another really good thing here is that you get reduced damage taken for each element that is uncapped and the lowest. So in an ideal world, you'll have, you know, all of your resistance exactly the same, and you'll have the incredible flask effect, essentially allowing you to mitigate like 20% of elemental damage you take. So if you combine all of these massive defensive layers together, you end up with an incredibly strong character. To boot, you also have insane life regeneration due to the agnostic. If I was to kind of just show you, let's go into the Blood Aqueducts here. See if we can get hit. Anything that doesn't one-shot you essentially can't kill you, due to the fact that you have insane mana regeneration as well as insane life regeneration. I'll show you what I mean here if we just kind of run over here, try and get hit. Is anything going to be able to hit me because of my dodge? So you can see here I'm not really... Okay, so you see my life just rubber bands instantly, and that is due to agnostic. You know, we can kind of just AFK here. So if you actually look at agnostic, it says, while not on full life, sacrifice 20% of your mana per second to recover that much life. So as you can see here, we have incredible mana regeneration here, just incredible mana regeneration. So sacrificing even 20% of that is going to instantly regenerating your life. So it's going to be completely insane. Very, very good there. And you also have Arcane Cloak, of course, which is really, really strong. So if you want to just take a look at the clear speed, you know, you one-shot everything in maps anyway, so this is kind of like the clear speed you can expect, which is really, really pretty good for one of the best bosses in the game, and it's pretty fun to play, so very nice there. Now, in addition to this, you can also, because of the agnostic and all of your mana regeneration, sustain Righteous Fire, which, you know, we've talked about earlier. When you have all your flasks up, you know, and you're using Berserk, Sigil, you know, it takes your damage really to the next level. You can also throw in Valar there as well, and you're going to get a character that can basically burst down most things in the game, even on like 5 or 6 man HP, which is really, really good. Like Cortex is no problem on 5 man HP. It's not going to be any sort of an issue for your character once you have full gear. So very, very powerful. Now, overall, what do we got? We have a character that is essentially incredibly fast, got incredibly good clear or boss damage, and is essentially immortal to anything that doesn't one-shot it. So to kind of give you guys a bit of a kind of like a tip, I've tanked pretty much everything, except Azeri Flame Blast. No problem. Like you can tank Shaper Beams, you can tank Shaper Slam, you can tank, you know, a couple Shaper Balls. About the only thing you can't tank is insane mods on the feed. Like if you get hit with like an Azeri Flame Blast with like 300% more damage, you're gonna die. But you know, you can stand in, a good example is, you know, the Breach Lord invitation. You know how Tull fires all of those ice balls? You can just stand in that. You can literally just sit there and throw mines. Okay, so to kind of get into a bit of gameplay wise, how do you get maximum damage from this build? Well, do I have a boss that I can kind of show you on? Let's take a look if I have a bit of a boss here that I can show you on. Let's do a Minotaur, shall we? This will be a bit of a demo. Screw it, we'll do a Phoenix. I'll show you guys kind of how the build works, and that'll be a really good tutorial, and then we'll wrap up, and you guys can kind of have a pretty good idea of how the old build works. So let's just really quick run through this map here, and I should really be using Ball Lightning to maximize my damage. But we'll do the clear, and then we'll also do the old Ball Lightning for the boss. We'll do a gem swap. How's that? So you can see here that we're just going to be sprinting through this map real nice and quick. And then we'll explain a little bit how the burst works in the rotation, and you guys will get a pretty good idea of whether or not you want to give this build a go. Got to turn RF on, I always forget. But yeah, pretty strong. So you can see here that we're clearing packs just effortlessly. The chaining through Arc is really good. You do have also the option to go with other skills if you'd like. Arc and Ball Lightning aren't the only ones here, but they are definitely going to be some of the most effective. So you can see just chaining like nobody's business. Okay, so here's the boss. We'll chuck in Ball Lightning here, and I'll teach you guys kind of how the go is with Miner. So when you're playing a Miner, you want to do what's called pre-stacking. So when you do this, you want to stack up as many mines as you can. You want to then pop all your cooldowns and then flame dash in, and then you'll see that it just melts. So now another thing that you'll see, okay, if I don't have cooldowns up, I do no damage, and that's because I haven't used Indigo or Arcane Cloak. You activate it and they just die. So let's talk a little bit about what we just saw. So the build essentially revolves around cooldown windows. So cooldown windows are essentially, when you have your cooldowns up, you're online. When you don't, you don't. So as I showed before, if you look at my tooltip here, without anything on, without Arcane Cloak, Berserk, or anything like that on, I do no damage essentially. But when I have everything on, like Berserk and all that kind of stuff like that, we go to an incredible amount of damage. It's like almost 20 times the damage, probably higher than 20 times. So you essentially play a kiting game until you have all your cooldowns up on this build, and then you sit in a corner pre-stack and you blow all your cooldowns and move, and then a boss dies. That's essentially how this gameplay works, and you can get a ton of good results out of this build. It's got fantastic clear, fantastic boss damage, and if you're interested in seeing more, or you're kind of want to check out the build, definitely swing by the stream. But hopefully you guys have enjoyed the video, and this is just a short introduction to it. Definitely check out Akane's channel, I'll link in the description, as well as SkCloudy if you're also interested in some different POVs for this build. And with all that said, I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.